Coming up on Carnegie-Knight News, a special report looking at the impact of the landmark decision to overturn Roe v. Wade.
Concerns that maternal mortality will rise as access to abortion is limited.
And how the merger between Catholic and secular health systems impacts access to reproductive care.
Good evening and welcome to Carnegie-Knight News. I'm Deanna Pistono.
And I'm Shelby Ray Wills. Thank you for joining us. Tonight, we bring you part 2 of a 2-night special exploring the impact of the U.S. Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade, which eliminated the federal right to abortion and returned regulation to the states.
This report features work from America After Roe, an examination of the impact of the reversal of Roe v. Wade on healthcare, culture, policy, and people, produced by Carnegie-Knight News21.
We were part of the News21 team, a group of 25 journalists from universities across the United States who spent the summer traveling to cities big and small with the goal of helping the public better understand the impact of this monumental decision.
First up tonight, in the past 20 years, the number of U.S. hospitals operating under Catholic healthcare directives grew by more than 28%. And as journalist Naomi Delka-Miller shows us, this can limit reproductive healthcare for many communities, despite laws guaranteeing access.
A lot of times, hospital administrators will say, it's either we close up our hospital or you agree to this merger and lose just these, handful of services.
Hospitals that see themselves struggling find that they would be able to relieve themselves of debt, perhaps.
But they don't realize that they're going to lose the ability to provide full comprehensive care to people in their areas.
The stress that puts on advocates, I can tell you right now, is immense because we don't want our local hospital to go away.
Because we're in a rural area, we have limited transportation, we have high rates of poverty, we have people who don't have access to the internet to find out alternative forms of care.
The particular red flags that we saw, the loss of services that we are most concerned of because of the fact that Ellis is merging with the Catholic healthcare system, are 3 predominantly. So reproductive health care, gender affirming care, and end-of-life care.
What people tend to hear about is the extraordinary cases where some care is denied. What they don't hear about is all those instances where physicians, clinicians have made a judgment to put the patient first.
If someone is upset or afraid that a potential merger is going to mean that they can't access things that are immoral, well, then don't merge. If it's that important for someone in, somewhere in rural Arizona to have access to be able to end the life of her unborn child, well, then it's incumbent upon Planned Parenthood or whatever to provide that facility.
A Planned Parenthood is not going to be able to fill in the gaps when it comes to postpartum tubal ligations or emergency pregnancy care, miscarriages, ectopic pregnancies. You can't go to a Planned Parenthood for treatment of a miscarriage. You have to go to a hospital.
I think the basic thing about a hospital is providing health care. Is that what we're doing, providing health care? Is that what a hospital does? Or is this a hospital for people who agree with Roman Catholic doctrine?
And one of the biggest problems, of course, as you know, is that you will not know whether the hospital will provide you with full reproductive rights services.
In those situations where people are not informed, right? They go to the hospital and they can't get that which they want to get. The question to ask is, who has the responsibility to make that information, to disclose that information publicly? Is it the Catholic institution? Is it the secular institution? Is it government regulators?
Any hospital that's going to serve even a tiny community ought to have their transactions scrutinized to the extent that services will not be lost.
Even though we could say we have great health care, we have access to health care, that still only speaks to a certain population. When we again get to the marginalized, left out, the forgotten, poorer communities, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done.
I think underlying all of this is the inequities of our healthcare system and the fact that institutions who purport to have an institutional religion is somehow greater than our personal freedoms and our personal choices.
We know that people are upset that such and such secular hospital merges with Catholic hospital or whatever the case may be. And I think a really important response to that is for all of us to recognize, why were these Catholic healthcare institutions founded to begin with? The reason they were formed was to provide care in the spirit of in the healing mission of Jesus. That's why we're doing this. We're here. We're in the business of healing people, right? We're not in the business of hurting people.
For Catholic hospital systems as well as non-Catholic systems, like any other industry, consolidation and getting bigger and bigger gives you more market power. So I think we are likely to see this continue. I do think in states like New York, we're trying to pilot some things now to give the community a say, to sort of rebalance public policy, which has been over on the side of letting health systems do what they say is needed, right? We are now starting to make them prove that this is actually really good for the community. And I think I'm hopeful.
The United States has one of the highest rates of maternal mortality in the developed world, a problem experts fear will worsen with the reversal of Roe v. Wade.
Journalists Jada Respres and Peyton Brooks visited 2 states with some of the worst rates of maternal mortality to talk to activists, doulas, and doctors fighting to help people amid growing odds.
So my name is Monica Simpson. I'm the Executive Director of Sister Song. We are the National Women of Color Reproductive Justice Collective based in the South, Atlanta, Georgia. All the states really needed, an opportunity to create a way to bring our people together, to give them access to resources, just to really understand what is happening in our communities every single day. Maternal health in this country is something that I'm glad that we're now finally talking about it, and Sister Song has been one of those organizations, for many years now, really sounding the alarm that we are in a major crisis in this country. We're knowing now that Black women are dying at a rate 3 to 4 times higher than white women in childbirth, all of that. So we have been on the front lines of that with so many different organizations now for many years. But in Georgia, it's even more critical for us.
There were people that were going to have a termination when the Georgia law became unenjoyed, which was 4 weeks later or sometime later, like that day, who had such terrible heart disease that the procedure had to stop, and that they ultimately were admitted to an ICU to carry a pregnancy that they knew might kill them. My clients have become very aware. They are frightened just to conceive intentionally, because they worry that they would have a complicated pregnancy situation, and what would they do? These are healthy, reasonable people that are scared to have a baby, the most basic of all human instincts.
I was born and raised in the South. When I went into medicine, I knew I wanted to provide care in the South. This is my home, this is my community. It's not the easiest place to provide OBGYN care generally, including abortion care. Even before the Dobbs decision, things were hard. I'm an OBGYN here in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm also a fellow with Physicians for Reproductive Health and the American College of OBGYNs. We've definitely seen a correlation in the data between states that have more abortion restrictions and those that have worse maternal morbidity and mortality. We are having to wait for people to get sicker. Many people with high-risk pregnancies aren't able to get care and are either being forced to continue pregnancies or go out of state. We're seeing delays in accessing care, which causes more risks. Women of color have higher rates of maternal morbidity and mortality than their white counterparts. I think that there are a lot of reasons for that. I think some of it is racism just in society and racism within the healthcare system. There's also more barriers to care that people of color historically face. People of color here in Georgia have higher rates of being uninsured. That affects your ability to access prenatal care, to access care postpartum.
Here in America, when we talk about our mortality rate, oftentimes we think that we're just talking about when women are pregnant or immediately after, but we're really talking about that whole phase of being pregnant up until at least a year postpartum. I remember when the decision for Roe versus Wade was made, I screenshot it because I was in like such disbelief. I'm like, there's no way that this is real, right? It just has upset the ecosystem, if you will. Like now we have moms who might not want to have been moms. You know, when we think about the fact that Black and brown bodies, you know, are not being respected or treated well, and literally are dying. Sisters, moms, you know, cousins, wives are dying, but we're in a state of like, oh, but you need to stay with child. I sleep well knowing that even though, you know, we might have white men making decisions about what women should be able to do with their bodies, I am grateful to be in a community where I know that women who need help are still being helped.
There are three things that I need to do. First, I need a veto message, an official veto message that I must sign. The second thing I need to do is give it the veto stamp. The veto stamp has been applied.
I was just mad. I was extremely angry. Like that was my emotion through the whole thing. This whole session, we've had doctors, OBGYNs, family physicians, you know, all kinds of medical professionals coming up to the General Assembly almost every week, trying to convince them that an abortion ban like Senate Bill 20 is going to be harmful to their patients, to their practices. It's not just, you know, the ability to choose whether or not to be pregnant. It's like if you have complications, if you know, you don't know. I mean, pregnancy is inherently more dangerous than an abortion. So now we're forcing women into situations that are inherently more dangerous than maybe an option they would have chosen otherwise.
There's a very high and good chance that had that law been passed back then, whereas I almost lost my life, I would have lost my life. Two days after my 2-week appointment, the incision in my C-section popped open and began leaking. I was admitted to the hospital because I had a fever over 106. The next morning, I had an infectious disease doctor come in and tell me, so you're at life and death right now. We're gonna prepare you for a DNC surgery. Luckily, when I woke up from that surgery, it was just a DNC, and they said they found a considerable amount of placenta left behind that was not removed. that was just sitting in my body this whole time. The maternal mortality rate is where it is because people truly just simply, and at this point, are kind of refusing to listen to Black birthing people because they truly do think in some ways we're ignorant. I just want all birthing people to know that you are in your right to fight for your right, to speak up for yourself, to stand up for yourself, to advocate for yourself, for you and your family members, and that you are not in the wrong.
Maya Jackson, founder and executive director of Mame Inc. I am a community-based doula, also maternal health advocate, and I'm a mama. I prepared myself as much for birth in the hospital as possible. And then on top of my wishes and stuff being disregarded while I was in the hospital, the nurse forgot to massage my uterus. So I had been hemorrhaging for a while. And thankfully, you know, it wasn't a negative so severe that I had to get a blood transfusion. But it was still just an awful experience. And I started to learn that this was a shared experience for Black women in this country.
There needs to be, some type of reckoning in the healthcare system where doctors are taking Black women's voices more seriously. I think that's why we use the term trust Black women a lot, because a lot of times, a lot of the pregnant people who are going in to have their children are advocating for themselves, and the doctors aren't hearing them.
What we're trying to do is just to navigate how to get people access to the care that they need, but also how do we fight back and regain.
I thought it was done. We had done the hard work. My generation had gone forward and, held the banner and made it safe and reasonable for the women to come after us. And the realization was the fight will never end. Even if we can turn back the tide now, the forces against women, reproductive health, will never go away. And so that vigilance and constant work are necessary. OBGYNs are not fighting this fight alone. Patients are not fighting this fight alone. Women are not fighting this fight alone. And I think voices have been heard.
Just before Roe v. Wade ended in the United States, Mexico decriminalized abortion.
Now activists south of the border are helping those north of the border build networks to create access. And as journalists Kevin Palomino and April Peardont tell us, they are helping, even in restrictive states.
El 1 de septiembre pasa lo de Texas. El 7 de septiembre, la Corte Mexicana declara inconstitucional el delito de aborto en todo el territorio mexicano. Entonces era de locos.
Que justamente lo irónico de que pase al mismo tiempo la negativa en Estados Unidos y el acceso en México hizo que nos volteáramos a ver. A mí me puede escribir alguien y me dice, oye, pues me acabo de dar cuenta que estoy embarazada, ¿no? Lo primero que yo pregunto es si ya sabe cuántas semanas tiene de embarazo, ¿no? Cómo lo confirmó, etcétera. Y ya una vez que tenemos esa información y que la chica tiene las pastillas, yo le comparto la información de cómo se usan, ¿no?
Y bueno, el día de Roe versus Wade y como el siguiente mes y diciembre fueron así, tuvimos días con 300 solicitudes diarias.
Están muy asustadas, muy ansiosas, porque a veces preguntan, ¿pero qué me hace esta pastilla? ¿Qué va a pasar si voy al médico luego después de tomarme las pastillas? ¿Qué voy a esperar? ¿Tengo este síntoma? ¿Es normal? ¿No es normal?
Pues todo el mundo pensó que como éramos una organización mexicana que habla español, que está en México, La mayoría de las personas en Estados Unidos que nos iban a buscar era de habla hispana, inmigrantes, indocumentadas, y no, es en general. El único dato que les puedo dar es que la mayoría solo habla inglés, pero ese dato nos da la idea de que no son mayoritariamente migrantes, ¿no? Las que nos están buscando, es decir, todavía no llegamos a esas mujeres por múltiples razones.
Sé que en Estados Unidos es mucho más complicado, ¿no? Por eso no puedo platicar cómo está hecho todo el traslado, ¿no? Pero, pues sí, ¿no? Obviamente lo hacemos por medio de alianzas con personas en Estados Unidos.
Ya tengo algunos años acompañando con medicamento en México y pues más recientemente colaborando con la red transfronteriza acá en Estados Unidos. El primer contacto que yo tuve lo tuve con una persona con la que me canalizaron las libres. Ellas mandaron el medicamento, yo solo lo crucé, se lo entregué, de ahí ella se encarga de distribuirlo.
Me llega un mensaje de que tal persona necesita. Me mandan la dirección y donde hay que mandarlos y yo franqueo el medicamento y ahí termina mi parte. Entonces, mientras estas leyes aparezcan en más y más estados, vamos a estar, creo, expandiendo nuestro trabajo a atender a las personas embarazadas donde se requiera. Yo no sé cuántas personas hay que hacen el mismo trabajo que hago yo, pero yo sé que somos varios.
Abortion restrictions don't affect us all the same way. And I think what's needed more in the conversation is how large of a role immigration plays in abortion care.
I take all the calls and fund anyone who needs their abortions paid for. Specifically, like undocumented people who live here are landlocked because we have the checkpoints that are 100 miles north of the port of entry, and in any main highway leaving the valley, there's 4 in the valley, 3 main highways, and those 3 are covered.
And so people who are trying to leave the Rio Grande Valley are stopped and asked about their immigration status.
It's more on the ground travel that people who are undocumented will opt to. So they're having to grapple with like, God, I either really, really risk it or like I just stay pregnant.
Or C, they find alternative ways to end their pregnancy.
Self-managed abortion is something that is rising as a response to the lack of healthcare.
These laws are very terrifying. We legally cannot fund travel or housing or any other practical support just because of how muddy these laws are and purposely confusing.
And it's this confusion of like, what is legal, what isn't, can I get sued for everything? Because they'll say that you cannot get sued for having an abortion, like you yourself. But we've had situations where people have gone to jail for them. So
you have this state saying, you know, you can't send in abortion medication into the state, that they're creating their own laws around abortion medication, but the federal government, which supersedes state law, has their own set of rules.
So it's the risk of criminalization and not just jail or prison, but like being detained through ICE, where you can only imagine what those conditions are. It's the risk of never being able to see your family again. It's the risk of going back to the country that you may have like immigrated from or migrated from, you know, so I feel like it's just there's just a lot to lose.
I mean, I think there's a lot of fear in general if you're an undocumented person in this state or in this country. It gets worse when you start thinking about, you know, access to abortion care. and trying to get that care for yourself or trying to get that care for others.
Yo creo que tenemos que hacer una estrategia especial para las personas inmigrantes indocumentadas en territorios específicos, ¿no? O sea, necesitamos que la organización comunitaria, la solidaridad internacional, la población de Estados Unidos resuelva ese problema.
Y creo que hace falta hacer ese análisis más fino, más detallado, ¿no? De qué está pasando exactamente y de qué manera sí se puede acompañar los abortos.
We're figuring out a world without abortion access, while they have been for a very long time, so there's a lot to learn from them.
Pues esperemos que nuestras redes se sigan fortaleciendo, que aparte no solo somos las mexicanas, ¿no? No podríamos hacer nada de esto si no hubiera alianza en Estados Unidos, ¿no? Si no hubiera mujeres convencidas en Estados Unidos de que esto es un derecho y que seguramente con o sin nosotras, lo que ya se inició, ellas lo van a seguir fortaleciendo, ¿no?
That's it for this special edition of Cronkite News.
To see more from this News21 project, visit americaafterroe.news21.com. Thanks for joining us.